Hey guys, if you'd look around, most of the hardware ladder DACs, they don't have a volume control. So be them from musician audio, holo audio, audio GD, Dena Frips, and there are many others. They don't have such a feature, with a few exceptions like Rockna, MSB, maybe others, but most of them don't have any of that, and that could be a big problem since some of the best loudspeaker amplifiers that I've heard at my place were power amplifiers. And those huge metal boxes and those R2R units don't have volume controls, meaning that a third device should be included in between that would control their volume, and that is called a preamplifier or a line amplifier. Of course, some are doing that a better job, some are lowering the signal to noise ratio, and that could alter the final outcome in a very good or a very bad way. So in my Musician Aquarius R2R ladder DAC review, I've mentioned that it has only one con, and that is a lack of a volume control. But months later, they released a high-performance preamplifier that is called Monoceros, and this is its story. Design-wise, Monoceros borrows the same design cues from their DA converters. It has the same height and width with Aquarius, matching its amazing build quality. It's only deeper, heavier, and better looking to me. It screams musician audio from afar, thanks to its smooth lines, thick metal plates, and bold looks. It uses a CNC machined metal case, and you'll find the usual metal cones put in a Bermuda Triangle configuration. Its front plate has a serious thickness of 1.5 centimeters, and its overall structure feels rock solid and really well put together, exactly how a high-end unit should look and feel. As for controls, on its front plate you'll find an on-off button that works as an analog input selector. In the middle there's a big screen that offers great visibility in the dark, and on the right you'll find a volume wheel. On its back you can spot a pair of RCA and two pairs of XLR inputs, meaning that you can connect up to 3 sources at once. As for outputs, there's a pair of RCA and XLR outputs, and both can be used at the same time. If you are using bookshelf loudspeakers with a powered subwoofer, that RCA output might come in handy, so please keep that in mind. After opening its case, I've checked again if I didn't pop the hood of their Aquarius DAC, because frankly they share a lot of things in common. A big portion of its PCB design takes 4 ladders of resistors built in a true balanced configuration. It's important to know that only a single resistor per channel will be working at any given time and volume level, followed by analog relays that you can find in the best preamplifiers of today. Its line amplifier circuit is based on discrete components without a single op-amp in the signal path. Its analog circuit is biased into class A, consuming constant power at all times for a better definition and detailed retrieval at low-level listening. Its power supply design is equally impressive and is very reminiscent of their Aquarius DAC. You'll find the same Meanwell power supply, an oversized 60-watt single copper transformer. The final DC voltage is then rectified with diodes and then stabilized with an obscure number of voltage regulators. Its final power filtering stage uses a substantial amount of high-end Yelna-Silmic 2 capacitors, and those are some of the best current production caps that money could buy. So what's exactly a preamplifier and why you might need one? Well, a preamplifier is actually designed to amplify the weaker signal that is coming from your source by increasing its voltage, by increasing that volume up, and by conditioning it and preparing it for the next stage that follows for the power amplifiers. Preamplifiers are also designed to accept a very wide range of impedance, so it could be very high impedance, very low, doesn't matter, but they will always output a very low impedance, so they can fully preserve the signal to noise ratio and the frequency response of your source to the fullest. And you should also know that power amplifiers, they don't like very high impedance sources because they will need to work much harder in achieving the same sound pressure level and thus increasing the total harmonic distortion. A preamplifier can start its life as a very simple volume control for your digital or analog source, and that is usually called a passive preamplifier. Some companies might have very different philosophies behind their preamplifier. So some might want to color your music by adding some vacuum tubes or maybe transistors, but others don't want to color your sound in any way, just leave it exactly as it is. And I'm already using such kind of preamplifier for about 2 years now, I believe, and that is called the Benchmark HPA4. And before I tell you exactly how Monoceros performed in my setup, you should understand that I'm not listening only to the Monoceros, to the preamplifier, but to the whole setup that I'm having. So Aquarius DAC will be doing all the heavy lifting, that will be preamplified by the Monoceros, that will send all that goodness to two Benchmark HB2 power amplifiers, and then all that will be played by those loudspeakers that you see behind me. Sound-wise, when I was exchanging that Benchmark HPA4 with the musician Monoceros, the biggest fear that I had is that super transparent nature of my setup, that highly detailed nature of my setup would be just toned down a bit and I wouldn't hear all those nuances as easily. Because a preamplifier can improve a lot of things, including control of the drivers, but it can also add some noise, it can add some distortion, and that is really the last thing that you want to have in your setup. Luckily, with the Monoceros in place, everything just appeared super clean, super transparent, like I was listening to the Aquarius and nothing more. It was just improving everything about the Aquarius. Control of the drivers, speed, slam, but detail retrieval wasn't going down. Even my 70s blues collection, jazz collection, I could hear all those imperfections pretty loud and clear, and I didn't need to flex my mind to hear all that. And a few rounds of whiskey later, a few albums later, and Monoceros was still going super clean, super transparent, very, very close to that Benchmark HPA4, and that is already an amazing thing in my book because HPA4 costs by around 3 times more, so that's quite impressive. When I went much lower on that volume level, I've observed that all those micro details and micro nuances didn't run away, didn't hide in the shadows, so I could still feel them and hear them very easily, very defined. And I was surprised at how impactful my setup sounded even at low level listening. And all that fullness, all that mid-range density that that musician Aquarius is known for wasn't toned down not even by a single notch. And I was surprised by how natural, how warm those metallic drivers sounded, and never have believed that KEF reference free can sound so relaxing, so smooth, with the right selection of electronics and music. While musician Aquarius is already a very fast sounding R2R ladder DAC, mind you that is a very unusual thing to say about such creations, I've always felt that it needs a little bit of help down low. While its bass notes were easily reaching those subterranean territory pretty easily, it wasn't that impactful sounding. I wasn't feeling those bass notes with my body. I wanted just a little bit more energy down low. And with the Benchmark HPA4, I believe that it solved some of that problems to a certain degree, but I believe that Monoceros was just taking all those bass notes, will be splitting it in multiple layers, and will be delivering all that information towards my listening spot in waves. So it would add not only bass quantity, but also some air, some weight, some layers, and I believe that ultimately it improves also the bass quality. And the most important thing to say is that Monoceros adds an unforgettable bass slam and impact, something that completely changes all my preconceptions about transit response with R2R ladder DACs. And putting all the jokes aside, Monoceros just added a much needed impact with such creations with R2R ladder DACs, and just completely discarded all those tiniest traces of digitals in my setup, transforming my digital music collection in live performances in the comfort of my home. Let's talk a little bit about its tonality. So besides adding a much needed control and a really nice impact in the bass, it also added some organic flavor into my music that is really hard to describe. It's like adding some warmth, adding some smoothness, some soul into a cold or bright sounding setup. It's like switching from a Class D amplifier to a transistor-based Class A monster amplifier. It's like someone added a tube output stage to your DAC without you knowing about it, so it's something like that. So Monoceros added some weight in my music, bass notes and all that mid-range just felt more playful, while scaring away all the grittiness, all the listening fatigue for my music. And considering all its discrete circuitry and of course its classy working principle, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that it added just more texture, more meat to the bone, a little bit more weight and fullness everywhere else. Monoceros has a high density type of sound, filling the gaps in the room, making it bigger than life, and always infusing a fuller tonality, bringing a feeling of calm and effortlessness. On very rare occasions, you can stumble upon some amazing digital creatures that have proper line circuits inside. So it so happens that I have two such units at my disposal, the Matrix Audio Element X and the Gold Note DS10 Plus. And while I can nitpick and complain about several features they have, I've always felt that they have really nice preamplifier sections. So as you can guess, adding a preamplifier to a device like that wouldn't improve my listening experience that much. So what was very clear from the start, so very defined, very different with the Aquarius DAC, was just a guess game with such devices. So personally, I wouldn't add a preamplifier with those devices because it wouldn't elevate and improve my listening experience. As you can see, it really depends on what source is being connected to a preamplifier. So some of them might improve quite a lot, some of them a little, some of them not at all. But the final lesson is actually very, very simple. So if your source has a higher output impedance, a lower voltage to the industry standard, and an oversimplified volume control, then I believe a preamplifier will be improving your listening experience quite a lot. Okay guys, I've also compared my own benchmark HPA4 with the musician Monoceros, and you can find all that goodness below in my written review. It's on chapter 4 and I believe it's worth your time. As for my conclusion, considering its over-the-top build quality, its amazing selection of components, its resistor ladders and a very high number of analog relays, plus its highly transparent nature that is very faithful to the source, that fully preserves dynamic range and never adds noise or distortion into the mix, it's my pleasure to recommend the musician Monoceros as an outstanding preamplifier. And all things considered, I honestly believe that it costs too little for the performance that you are getting. This is the most charismatic preamplifier that I've tried, and it's my pleasure to award it my golden award. It's fully deserved. Okay guys, my full in-depth review can be found on my website. It's much longer than this one. In case you want to support this channel, please subscribe to it, and as usual, listen to my music, be positive, and I'll see you next time. Cheers!